The moment Elias's phone exploded to life at 2 a.m., it felt as if the entire universe tilted in a direction he never could have imagined. The sharp ringtone tore through the silence of his tiny living room, where Eli had fallen asleep on the frayed old sofa. On the coffee table, a half-finished beer still carried a ring of condensation, and the TV glowed mutely like a quiet ghost. His body jerked upright on instinct, an old habit forged from years of waking up for Lily, his 10-year-old daughter. Even after finishing a brutal 14-hour shift at the auto shop, Eli sprang up like a coil. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. And who calls at this hour unless something is terribly wrong? His mind went straight to Lily. She was sleeping over at her friend Sophie's tonight. Was something wrong? His heart hammered hard enough to crack his rib cage as he picked up. "Please, I need you." It was a woman's voice, choked, trembling, as if she was clinging to the last thread of hope. "Bayside Medical Center, room 302. Please come." Eli shot fully upright. "I think you've got the wrong Arthur. Is that you?" Her voice cracked apart in raw desperation. "I'm so scared. I don't want to be alone." Something in that tone, primitive, exposed fear, hit the deepest part of Eli, the part he had locked away after Elena died 4 years ago. He remembered that ice-cold feeling of facing darkness alone, the crushing weight of loneliness when the world collapsed and there was no hand to hold. "I'm not Arthur," Eli said, "but I can come. Just try to breathe, okay?" He didn't even understand why he said it. The words leapt out of him as if a kinder version of himself had temporarily taken the wheel. The call ended. Eli stared at the phone, wondering if he was dreaming. Then logic rushed in. What the hell was he doing? Driving to a hospital in the middle of the night because a stranger dialed the wrong number. His eyes drifted to the photo of Elena on the shelf. His wife's smile, forever frozen at 36, seemed to watch him, asking quietly, "How are you really living, Elias?" Next to it was Lily's picture. His daughter, gap-toothed, holding her cardboard kindergarten diploma, 10 years old, sleeping safely at her friend's house. Everything he did, all the overtime shifts, all the nights passing out on this worn sofa was for her. The phone felt heavier in his hand. Who was that woman? Why was she clinging to a man named Arthur who didn't bother to show up? 2:08 a.m. His rational brain listed 100 reasons to lie back down. He had a transmission to install in the morning, and he needed to pick up Lily at 9. He didn't even know exactly where Bayside Medical Center was. Yet his hands reached for his keys. He called Mrs. Martha Higgins, the elderly neighbor who had insisted multiple times on being his emergency contact. He apologized for waking her and gave a brief explanation, asking if she could keep an eye on his apartment in case Lily came home early. Then he stepped out the door. Chicago at dawn was eerily empty. Traffic lights changed for cars that didn't exist. Eli drove his beat-up old Ford through the dark city, each mile making him question his own sanity. His shabby car looked completely out of place in the hospital parking lot. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, everyone's face seemed washed pale. Eli followed the antiseptic hallway to the third floor. With every step, the same question echoed. Who goes to a hospital for a stranger at 2:00 in the morning? But the answer always returned. Because sometimes in life, all someone needs is someone who shows up. Room 302 was slightly ajar. Eli hesitated. He could still turn around, pretend this night never happened. But the steady beeping of the monitors pulled him forward. He knocked softly. She lay there, copper hair spilling across the white pillow, her face pale but so strikingly beautiful. Beautiful, it made him pause. Early 30s, and clearly fighting something far bigger than herself. "You're not Arthur." "No, I'm Elias. You dialed the wrong number," he added quickly when her eyes widened. "I just heard how frightened you sounded. I couldn't not come." She stared at him for a long moment, then suddenly let out a small broken laugh, a sound tangled with gratitude and bitterness. "I'm Serafina Sterling," she said, "and it seems the universe sent me a guardian angel instead of a useless ex-boyfriend." The name jolted Eli. Sterling Networks, the massive telecom corporation known for swallowing up smaller companies. He had skimmed headlines before dismissing them. That world was galaxies away from his greasy auto shop. "Arthur and I broke up 3 weeks ago," she said, wincing as she tried to sit up. "The doctor said tonight would be rough." I called him again. "Stupid, I know." Her half-smile tasted bitter. Some promises were never meant to be kept. Eli hovered awkwardly at the door, unsure whether to step in or step out. He hadn't expected conversation. He just wanted to make sure she wasn't alone and then leave quietly. Do you want me to call anyone? Family? Friends? Serafina shook her head. No one. Hey, my father passed last year. My mother lives in Europe. As for friends, she glanced at the empty chair beside her bed. That kind doesn't show up at 2 a.m. But since you're already here, could you stay for a little while? Before Eli could answer, the door opened. A doctor entered. Tall, steel gray hair, every movement efficient and urgent. The latest results aren't good, the doctor said. We need to adjust treatment immediately. Miss Sterling's leukemia is progressing faster than expected. Serafina's expression didn't change, but Eli saw her fingers turn white as she clutched the sheet. The doctor turned to him. I'm Dr. Evelyn Cross, and you are Elias. I'm a friend of Serafina's. The lie slipped out as lightly as a breath, startling even himself. Outside in the hallway, Dr. Cross lowered her voice. Ms. Sterling has acute myeloid leukemia. We've been treating her for 3 months, but tonight the cancer is resisting the medication. She checked her watch. The next 48 hours are critical. The new regimen is stronger, but it comes with greater risks. Eli stood there swallowing each word like stone. So when she said she was scared, she meant it. Dr. Cross nodded. We'll begin the new treatment in an hour. Even if you are not family, she wants you to stay. Emotional support matters. Eli's hand tightened around his backpack strap. I'll stay as long as she needs. When the doctor left, he remained alone in the dim hallway, trying to understand how his life had veered onto this path. He should call Mrs. Higgins. He should check on Lily. He should go back to his already chaotic life. Instead, he walked back into room 302. Serafina now looked impossibly small. The strong, polished mask she wore had completely fallen away. Did the doctor tell you the dangerous part? She whispered. Most people run the moment they hear it. I'm not most people, Eli replied, taking the chair. So Serafina Sterling of Sterling Networks, tell me why a telecom heiress is alone here at 2 in the morning. Her brows arched. So you did recognize the name? I read the news sometimes. Eli chuckled softly while waiting for engine parts. Serafina studied him more closely, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. So what's the most important thing in your life? Elias. My daughter Lily, she's 10. The answer came instantly. Everything else is just detail. Serafina's gaze softened. Tell me about her. So he did. For over an hour, between the footsteps of nurses and the hum of machines, Eli talked about Lily, her science project on engine efficiency, her obsession with vintage cars, how she was better at mechanical intuition than math. Their Sunday movie nights they hadn't missed since Elena's passing. In return, Serafina cracked open her world, the pressure of being the sole heiress, a skeptical board of directors, the ex-boyfriend who fled after her diagnosis, the friends who evaporated when illness stole her shine. That conversation, strangely enough, felt effortless, as if two souls from distant worlds had stumbled into the same fragile moment. The doctor said, I might not make it through the night, Serafina said at last, voice eerily calm. That's why I called Arthur. I didn't want to die alone. Eli's heart dropped. Then I'll stay, he said, quiet but solid as bedrock. No one should face this alone. That night, beside a cold white hospital bed, a single dad and a dying billionaire woman standing on the edge of a 48-hour battle unwittingly stepped into a story that would alter both their destinies. If you're following this story on Ebon Stories, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss part 2, because the twists only get wilder from here. And tell me, do you think that 2 a.m. phone call was random, or was fate trying to intervene? Serafina survived that night, bluntly defying every grim prediction the doctors had laid out. When dawn broke, the critical window had passed. Her body was responding to the new treatment regimen far better than anyone had dared to hope. This time, she asked for Eli's phone number properly, directly, clearly. An intentional exchange, not a mistaken call in the dark. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice far steadier than it had been just hours before. Most people would never have come. Most people haven't been where I've been, he replied, thinking of those first terrifying nights after Elena died. Take care of yourself, Serafina Sterling. He left the hospital believing with absolute certainty that this was the end of their strange encounter. He had a daughter to pick up, a transmission to rebuild, a life to return to. He had no idea how wrong he was. 3 days later, just as Eli was preparing to close up Vance's garage for the evening, a glossy black car rolled into the lot like it had slipped out of a luxury auto commercial. The driver stepped out, a stern-faced man in a suit that probably cost more than Eli's monthly rent. He approached carrying a cream-colored envelope. "Ms. Sterling requests your presence at her residence tomorrow evening at 7, the man said, his voice perfectly crisp. "The address is inside the envelope. She instructed me to tell you that this matter is very important." Eli's first instinct was to shut it down immediately. His life was already tangled enough, like a mass of burnt wires. He didn't need a billionaire battling illness thrown into the mix. But curiosity, and if he was honest with himself, concern for Serafina, quietly won out. For the next 24 hours, he found himself distractible, unfocused, his mind continually circling back to the same question. What does Serafina want from me? Lily quickly noticed the odd behavior in their usual morning routine. "Dad," she frowned, "you just poured orange juice into your coffee and put my cereal in my lunchbox. What's wrong with you today?" All he could do was give her a sheepish smile, but that question stuck with him the entire day. What was wrong with him? Why was he so drawn to a woman he had only spent a few hours with? Someone who belonged to a world so far removed from his. It was like they were two different species. The Sterling estate was exactly what he imagined, and then some. A sprawling mansion overlooking the city, gardens trimmed to perfection, and a security system that made Fort Knox look like a children's playground. Eli stepped out of his truck, suddenly feeling out of place in his clean but faded jeans and the button-down shirt he had ironed within an inch of its life. A housekeeper led him through marble-tiled halls into a sunlit room where Serafina was waiting. She looked far better than she had under the harsh hospital lights. A flush of color had returned to her cheeks, though her whole presence still seemed fragile, as if a strong breeze might tip her over. When she saw him, she smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes, no longer just a polite mask. "Elias, you actually came." "You said it was important," he replied, remaining standing abruptly aware of how luxuriously poor he looked amid a room where the pristine white sofa probably cost as much as his entire truck. Serafina gestured for him to take the seat across from her. "I have a proposal for you," she said, her voice both serious and tinged with hesitation. "It's going to sound a little crazy, but I hope you'll listen to all of it before you say no." What Serafina proposed that evening is quite literally insane. She explained that her rare form of leukemia was treatable, but would require months of aggressive, relentless therapy. The prognosis was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The board of directors was using her illness as an excuse to seize control of the company. "They think I'm weak," Serafina said, a flash of anger lighting up her exhausted eyes. "They think they can push me off the track while I'm down. I need to prove to them and to the world that I'm not alone, that I have someone beside me, that I'm still sane enough to make decisions." "And what does that have to do with me?" Eli asked, though deep down he already knew the answer. "I need someone I can trust, someone who showed up for me without anything to gain." She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but as steady as steel. "I want to hire you, Elias, to become my partner. You'll accompany me to treatments, board meetings, public appearances, to show that I have someone at my side." Eli laughed, thinking she was joking. "You mean hire me as a fake boyfriend? Serafina, I'm a mechanic. I have oil under my nails and a kid at home. I don't belong in your world." "That's exactly why it works," Serafina countered. "You have no ties to my industry, no hidden motives, and I'll compensate you fairly. $1 million for 6 months. Eli stopped laughing instantly. Serafina continued, "That amount is enough to secure Lily's future. Enough to give her opportunities you've only dared to dream about." She had struck the nerve. $1 million, money that could rewrite the entire future for him and his daughter. A better home in a safer neighborhood, a college fund, and maybe one day the chance to open the auto shop he'd always dreamed of. But at what cost? "I'm offering you a chance to change your life, Elias," Serafina said quietly, her tone both gentle and strangely powerful. And all you have to do is stand beside me while I fight to live. Eli left the estate without giving an answer. His mind spun like an engine missing a spark plug. That money could change everything. But what was the price of stepping into someone else's world, pretending to be something he wasn't, facing public scrutiny, lying to everyone? He drove aimlessly through the city, eventually stopping at the cemetery where Elena rested. His wife's simple headstone cast a dim shadow under the thin moonlight. Eli stood there for a long time, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, breathing in the sharp cold of the night. "Ellie, what would you tell me to do?" he whispered. Elena had always been his compass, practical, resilient, and bluntly honest. What would she think if Eli agreed to something half real, half false, even if the ultimate goal was Lily's future? He remembered those early days after Elena's death, how hard he fought to keep everything from collapsing. The times he had to choose between Lily's extracurricular activities and the electric bill. The constant fear that a major car repair or a medical issue would push them into a debt they'd never escape. $1 million. Lily's future. The safety he'd never been able to promise. But what would he be teaching his daughter? That lying was acceptable if the money was enough? That principles were luxuries only the wealthy could afford? Those questions clung to him through the night. The next morning, Eli found Lily sitting at the small kitchen table, carefully stitching up a tear in her worn-out backpack. The sight hit him like a punch to the chest. She was 10 years old, learning to fix things instead of replacing them, accepting limitations as if they were normal. And Eli realized that was exactly the burden he hoped she'd never have to carry. When Lily looked up and smiled, gap-toothed, looking exactly like her mother, Eli knew the answer. He dialed the number Serafina had given him. "I'll do it," Eli said. The words felt strange and heavy in his mouth, part surrender to circumstance, part the sense that a new door had cracked open. "But I have conditions. Lily is always my first priority, and I won't lie to her about any of this." "Agreed," Serafina said immediately, relief unmistakable in her voice. "When can you start? I need time to talk to the shop. Find someone to manage things." 2 weeks. 1 week, Serafina corrected. Not a request, more like a breath, soft command. "I'll cover any losses. My first treatment cycle starts Monday, and I want you there." And just like that, Elias Vance, a single father, an ordinary mechanic, officially stepped into the glittering, ruthless, undercurrents-filled world of Serafina Sterling. A world completely foreign to him, a proposal beyond belief, and a path he had no way of knowing would lead him to where. The following week passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Eli went to Buck, the most experienced mechanic he had, and discussed handing over the shop's management for a while. The explanation Eli gave was only half true. He'd been invited by a big company to consult on fleet maintenance. Buck's eyes widened, but the surprise quickly faded into excitement. A chance for advancement, a raise. There was no reason to refuse. But the conversation with Lily was much harder. In their usual pizza place, surrounded by the smell of hot cheese and the clatter of voices, Eli gently explained that he would be working closely with Serafina Sterling for the next 6 months, helping her through her cancer treatment. "So, you're like her nurse?" Lily asked. A slice of pepperoni paused halfway to her mouth. "Not exactly, more like a friend who helps her. Someone who drives her to appointments, supports her in meetings when she's tired." Eli chose his words carefully, trying to balance truth with the half-truth he was now committed to. "And since she and I will be seen together a lot, people might think I'm dating her." Lily's eyebrows shot up. In her eyes was a mix of caution and concern. So much like Elena, it almost hurt. "Are you dating her? Is she going to be my new mom?" Eli squeezed his daughter's hand across the table. "No, sweetheart, nothing like that. She's just someone who needs help, and I happen to be in a position to help." Eli tried explaining more that the job paid very well, enough to move to a nicer place, save for Lily's college, even take that Disney World trip they had talked about for 3 years. Lily stared at him for a long moment with a measuring look that made him uneasy, a look far too similar to her mother's. "But if you pretend to date her, isn't that lying?" The question stabbed straight through Eli. "Yes, in a way," he admitted, because he couldn't expect Lily to hold on to principles he himself was bending. but sometimes life is more complicated. There's a difference between a lie that hurts someone and a lie that helps someone who truly needs it. Lily tilted her head, thinking, like when I told Mrs. Higgins I liked the sweater she gave me for Christmas, even though it was itchy and covered in cat hair. Despite the tension, Eli burst out laughing. Yeah, something like that. Lily nodded solemnly, then her face lit up like a Christmas tree. So, if we move, can I have a room with a window seat? And we paint it blue? And can we get a dog? You always said we couldn't because the apartment was too small. Eli ruffled her hair, relief flooding through him. One step at a time, sweetheart. Let me start this job first. Okay, the first Monday, the day Eli officially stepped into Serafina's world, he wore the new clothes her assistant had sent. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater so soft he felt unworthy of touching it. Everything felt foreign to a man used to living in cotton, denim, and the smell of motor oil. Serafina waited for him in the foyer. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, black trousers, a cream blouse, a silk scarf wrapped carefully around her head to hide the thinning hair from chemotherapy. Ready to be my eye candy? She joked. But the smile didn't fully hide the tension in her eyes. Eli offered his hand with exaggerated gentlemanly flair, making her laugh for real. What's on the schedule today? Chemo and then the board meeting? He asked as they headed for the door. Exactly. Serafina exhaled, her expression dipping slightly. Treatment at 10 a.m., board meeting at 2. My doctor told me to reschedule, but I can't look weak right now. Not when Marcus Thorne is circling like a vulture. Serafina's private cancer center was nothing like Eli had imagined. Leather recliners instead of hospital beds, warm lighting instead of harsh fluorescence, fresh flowers replaced every morning. But the truth remained. IV stands, monitors, antiseptic smells, and the pain hiding behind Serafina's attempts at composure. Eli had not prepared himself for this. She had been so sharp, so strong he'd almost forgotten she was sick. But when the nurse connected the IV and Serafina stifled a sharp breath as chemicals rushed into her bloodstream, everything became painfully real. You don't have to stay in the room there, Serafina said, sensing the tension in his eyes. Just being in the waiting area is enough. The staff all know who I am. But Eli shook his head. I'm not here just for show. He pulled a chair beside her and sat close. Tell me about your company, Sterling Networks. What do you actually do? 3 hours passed to the sound of chemo dripping steadily. Serafina spoke about her father's legacy, a telecommunications empire built from nothing, and her own vision to bring it into a new era. Eli listened, asked questions, and slowly watched life return to the pale slopes of her cheeks. When treatment ended and Serafina was too weak to stand, Eli helped her to the car without being asked, without needing an explanation. Paparazzi were waiting. Of course, Serafina had planned for that. A fragile heiress stepping out of a treatment center, supported by a mysterious man's arm. That was the kind of story every tabloid devoured. The next day, headlines were everywhere. Sterling heiress finds love amid illness. Who is the mystery man supporting Serafina Sterling? And just like that, Eli Vance, a regular mechanic, a single father who only wanted a quiet life, stepped into a media storm he had no idea was about to swallow him whole. So it worked, Serafina said dryly when Eli arrived at the estate the next day. She was curled up on the sofa, looking exhausted but oddly satisfied, her hand sliding across the tablet in front of her. Eli caught a glimpse of the photos of them. Serafina looking fragile but fiercely determined, and he himself caught in a side profile, his face serious as he helped her into the car. That's all you care about? Just the media effect? Eli couldn't hide the bitterness in his voice. After witnessing her struggle with pain, seeing everything boiled down to a strategic move in their arrangement, suddenly felt hollow. Serafina looked up, her expression unreadable. At this moment, yes, she said, pointing to the screen where an email was open. My board meeting is in 2 hours, and these photos just strengthened my position significantly. They can't paint me as a weak, isolated woman, not when there's a strong, devoted man beside me. I'm not devoted. I'm being paid, Eli reminded her, a surprising sting rising in him at being reduced to a bullet point in her strategy. Something flickered in Serafina's eyes. Maybe pain, maybe just exhaustion. Of course, I didn't mean otherwise. Her voice slid back to cold professionalism. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for the meeting. Chloe will take you to the library. You can wait there. Chloe Reeves, Serafina's personal assistant, led Eli into a paneled oak room lined with books. When she turned to leave, Eli gently touched her sleeve. Hey, can I ask you something? How long have you been working for Serafina? Chloe studied him with a calculating look, weighing how much she should share with a rented boyfriend. In 5 years, I started as an intern at Sterling Networks in college. Serafina selected me for her personal team after I graduated. So you know her very well, better than most. In that case, tell me about Marcus Thorne. Serafina talks about him like he's her sworn enemy. Chloe's face darkened slightly. Thorne was her father's right-hand man for nearly 30 years. He assumed he'd be the successor when Richard Sterling passed, but Richard left control to Serafina instead. Thorne never forgave her, especially now that she's making changes her father always resisted. And now with her illness, Eli hesitated. He's using it to push her out, Chloe finished. That's why she hired you to look strong, supported. She glanced at her watch. The car leaves for Sterling Tech Tower in 45 minutes. Serafina will want you dressed appropriately. I've prepared a few options in the parlor. Those options turned out to be 3 designer suits, any one of which probably cost more than Eli earned in a year. A tailor was waiting, making quick alterations to ensure that when Eli stepped out the door, he would look more like the boyfriend of a billionaire than a mechanic fresh off a shift. When they arrived at Sterling Tech Tower, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Chicago, Eli felt like an actor shoved onto stage before reading the script. The suit fit perfectly, but to him, it still felt like a costume. The hairstyle Chloe forced him to wear was too precise, too intentional for a man used to raking his fingers through his hair. Even his hands felt strange. The deep-set grease scrubbed away by a manicurist until almost nothing remained, though Eli knew it would never vanish entirely. Serafina, on the other hand, transformed without the slightest awkwardness, despite having undergone treatment that morning. She walked into the building with commanding confidence. The silk scarf had been replaced with a wig so natural that, had he not known, Eli would never have guessed. Makeup obscured the pale undertone of her skin, and the tailored suit radiated authority and control. Eli followed her, reminding himself of the old lessons from his military father. Stand tall, look people in the eye, speak only when needed and when you speak. Make it solid. Show strength without flexing. Simple rules but useful every time he stepped into a new battlefield. The boardroom was exactly the kind of place where people never laughed for fun. A large mahogany table polished like a mirror. Men in expensive suits seated around it, their gazes sliding between curiosity and open hostility. When Serafina introduced Eli as her partner, she offered no further explanation, no backstory, no clarifying details. She simply presented him as an undeniable fact everyone had to accept. As you can see, Serafina began, her voice like velvet wrapped steel, I am fully capable of continuing my role as CEO. My personal life is stable. My treatment is progressing well. My vision for this company remains clear. Any attempts to question my competency will be seen for what they are. Opportunistic power plays, nothing more. The men exchanged glances. One silver-haired man with eyes cold enough to make Eli think of sharks locked his gaze on him. And her companion, Marcus Thorne's voice was soft but razor-sharp, dripping with disdain. What's his background, Mr. Vance? What exactly is your role in all this? Before Serafina could answer, Eli leaned forward slightly. I'm here to support Serafina in whatever way she needs. He met Thorne's stare head-on, refusing to be intimidated. Some would call that love. Others would call it basic human decency. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. The room went silent, as if the air itself had been sucked out. Under the table, Serafina's hand found his, squeezing lightly, a gesture that could have been gratitude or a warning he'd just poked a hornet's nest. Eli wasn't sure which, but he squeezed back, a silent promise that he was all in, at least for now. After the meeting, as they walked toward the parking garage, Serafina broke the silence first. That response was unexpected. Thank you. Don't thank me, I just can't stand that tone, Eli replied, still surprised by the instinctive protectiveness he'd felt toward her. Those people are sharks. Yeah, Serafina nodded, her eyes lingering on the row of mirrored buildings reflecting the gray sky. And you just jumped into the tank with them. She turned to him, her expression suddenly sharper. Be careful, Elias. These people play for real. And it wouldn't be long before he would understand she wasn't exaggerating in the slightest. 2 weeks later, while Eli was picking Lily up from school, a black sedan slid into the parking lot and stopped right behind his old truck. Instinctual alertness flared. Eli immediately handed the keys to his daughter, motioning for Lily to get in the truck and lock the doors. Only when she was safely inside did Eli turn back. And when he saw who was stepping out of the sedan, a chill ran down his spine. Marcus Thorne, sleek gray suit, the walk of a man accustomed to commanding a boardroom with a single glance. Mr. Vance, I'd like a word, Thorne said, polite in tone but tinged with threat. Eli positioned himself squarely between the man and the truck. What do you want? I just want to understand your arrangement with Serafina Sterling. A smile flickered, thin, cold, and never reaching his eyes. Strange that someone like her would suddenly be involved with someone like you. Someone like me, Eli repeated, voice flat, but his gaze sharp. Oh, come now, Thorne murmured with a small shrug. A mechanic, a single father living in the poorer side of town. Not exactly the type of man Serafina has ever looked twice at, he tilted his head. I've stood beside Richard Sterling's board for 30 years. I knew him better than his own daughter. And I know when something doesn't add up. Tell me, how much is Serafina paying you to play the role of her boyfriend while she battles that disease? Eli's blood stilled, but his exterior remained calm. You're barking up the wrong tree. Are we sure about that? Thorne lowered his voice to something almost serpentine. $1 million over 6 months. Correct. For someone like you, that's life-changing money. Enough to make you do things you normally wouldn't. Eli stepped forward. Stay away from me and my daughter and stay away from Serafina. Thorne let out a soft, contemptuous laugh. What will you do? Run to Serafina and say I threatened you. She already knows I'm her enemy. But let me offer another path. He leaned in. 3 million. Just walk away and tell the press that this whole relationship was nothing but a fabrication. The blow hit Eli like a hammer. $3 million, a brand new life for Lily, an escape from a world he never belonged to. For a brief, flickering second, Eli genuinely considered it. But then Serafina's image appeared in his mind. A woman fighting both her illness and a board ready to rip her legacy from her hands. A woman who had dialed the wrong number in her moment of deepest fear and found a stranger who showed up when he didn't have to. You're trying to destroy her, Eli said, not a question. I'm trying to protect Sterling Networks from a woman who's too emotional, too fragile to lead. Thorne replied, voice hard as stone. Richard understood that business requires emotional distance. Serafina never learned that. Eli turned toward his truck. 3 million Vance, Thorne called after him. Think about your daughter. What kind of father turns down that kind of security? Eli stopped. In the terrifying quiet of that moment, he knew Thorne was partly right. He had taken the job for Lily, her future that had always been his driving force. But then he remembered that morning Lily carefully stitching the strap of her torn backpack instead of asking for a new one. Her quiet resilience, the way she never complained about what they lacked. If he took that money, what would he teach her? That loyalty could be bought. That principles were luxuries meant only for the wealthy. Eli drew in a long breath. The kind of father who wants his daughter to be proud of him, he said, opening the truck door. Lily looked up from her book, curiosity in her eyes. Who was that man, Dad? Someone who thinks he can buy things that aren't for sale, Eli replied, forcing a smile. How was school today, sweetheart? That night, after Lily was asleep, Eli called Serafina. He didn't want to discuss it over the phone. Someone like Thorne had more than enough resources to listen in. He suggested meeting somewhere neutral, a small cafe near his apartment, the kind of place Thorne would never bother to step into. Serafina arrived looking so different that Eli needed a second to recognize her. Simple jeans, a soft sweater, the silk scarf replaced by a beanie. Gone was the polished heir to a billion-dollar empire. What remained was a young woman who looked tired but fiercely resilient. When Eli described how Thorne had shown up at Lily's school, her face drained with fury. He went to Lily's school. She clenched the teacup. That's crossing every boundary. He offered me $3 million to walk away, Eli said quietly, aware of nearby ears, and to reveal that we're just pretending. Serafina was silent for a long moment. She stirred her tea, but didn't drink. And you refused? 3 million? Triple what I'm paying you? Of course, Eli said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Serafina looked up. Her eyes searched his for confirmation, for trust, or for proof of something she'd always feared. Is that, she whispered, all this is to you? Money. Eli exhaled, running a hand through his hair. At first, yes, I won't pretend otherwise, but that's not the only reason. I agreed because you needed help and I could help. Same reason I showed up at the hospital that night. He leaned forward, eyes steady on hers. Money matters, but it isn't everything. Something shifted between them in that instant, subtle but undeniable, like the ground quietly shifting beneath their feet. Serafina slowly extended her hand. Her fingers brushed his so lightly it hardly felt real. Thank you, she whispered, for being someone I can trust. The next day delivered a blow no one saw coming. Photos began circulating everywhere. Eli entering the Sterling estate late at night. Serafina handing him an envelope that looked like Keshin blurry documents that seemed to outline their agreement. The story spread like wildfire. Sterling heiress hires fake boyfriend to deceive the board and the public. Serafina's phone rang nonstop. The PR team shifted into full crisis mode, but the damage was spreading too quickly. Sterling Network stock plunged 15 points before the market even opened. Eli immediately drove to the estate. He found Serafina sitting calmly in the reading room, eyes fixed on the news ticker scrolling across the screen. That calmness in Eli's eyes was more worrying than panic. I'm sorry, he said the moment the door clicked shut. This is my fault. Thorne's been watching us. It's not your fault. Serafina's voice was steady, though the dark circles under her eyes betrayed a sleepless night. This is how the game works. I just didn't expect him to strike this fast. So what do we do now? Serafina turned to look at him. Her gaze was sharp, direct, unwavering. The question is, are you still in this with me, Elias? If you want out, I won't blame you. Things are about to get very ugly. And you and Lily, none of this is what you ever asked for. Mentioning Lily made Eli freeze. The judgment from kids at school, the gossip from parents. His daughter would feel the hit directly. But then he remembered the lesson he wanted Lily to learn. When someone you stand beside gets caught in a storm, you don't turn your back and run. I'm not going anywhere, Eli said, voice solid as stone. But we need a new strategy. Denial won't work. They have photos. They have documents. And at that moment, Serafina smiled, a small, calculated smile that reminded Eli that beneath the fragility was a CEO raised to run an empire. We're not denying, she said. We're taking control of it, then flipping the board. The press conference was Serafina's idea. When cameras lined up and reporters crowded the front steps of Sterling Tech Tower, Serafina stood tall, Eli beside her, and began telling their story, or at least the most advantageous version of it. Yes, she said, voice clear, ringing, confident. When Elias and I met, our relationship began as an arrangement. A wave of murmurs rippled through the press corps, but Serafina continued. I had just received a diagnosis that terrified me. In the middle of the night, I dialed the wrong number, and instead of hanging up, this man, a complete stranger, came to the hospital. He came because I needed someone. Serafina looked at Eli with an expression that tightened his chest, a look impossible to distinguish as real or performed, and perhaps even she no longer knew the difference. After that night, yes, I asked him to be my companion during treatment. I needed someone I could trust, someone not connected to my politics or my power. What I didn't expect was how quickly that arrangement became something real. The reporters practically leaned forward. Eli squeezed her hand, initially to support her, but when her fingers curled slightly in return, he realized it had become something far more than that. Money isn't the point, Eli said into the microphone, voice low and steady. The point is that sometimes even the strongest people need someone beside them. Even a billionaire, even a single father from the other side of town. The media tore into the story like birds on fresh prey. Within hours, the hashtag Sterling Love dominated every social platform. The wrong number romance. The billionaire and the mechanic. The world is stunned. Photos of them holding hands in front of the crowd were shared endlessly, romantic to the public, incredibly useful to the PR team. Thorne, of course, erupted with rage. His plan to destroy Serafina had backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable. The board quickly sensed the shift in public favor and hurried to publicly reaffirm their support for their young CEO. But Eli knew this was only the first round. As he left the building after the press conference, standing beside Serafina in the ongoing flash of camera lights, Eli realized something. He had just stepped into a war that wasn't his. A war Thorne had no intention of losing. A war whose fallout would hit both him and Lily. But when Serafina glanced at him, her eyes tired yet lit with the faintest spark of trust, Eli knew he wasn't going anywhere. The real battle was still ahead. What Eli didn't expect was how the line between pretend and real kept blurring in the weeks that followed. Serafina's treatments fell into the brutal rhythm unique to modern oncology. Poison pumped into the body on schedule, followed by days of exhausted recovery, a brief window of what could be called relative normal, and then right back to the poison again. Eli slowly learned medical terms he never wanted to know, developed a sixth sense for when Serafina's nausea was about to hit, and became an expert in the smallest forms of comfort. An extra pillow, a cup of ginger tea, a timely sentence, things that didn't erase the pain, but made the unbearable just a little less harsh. Lily, astonishingly, adapted to the new circumstances, with a resilience only children seem to possess. When the initial media storm settled, Serafina suggested Lily come visit the estate, thinking a big house and sprawling garden might lift a 10-year-old's spirits. None of them predicted the almost immediate bond that formed between Lily and Serafina. It started with a tour of the mansion's library, Serafina showing Lily first edition children's classics, telling stories of how she used to hide between the shelves to avoid her father's intimidating business partners. "Dad, did you know Serafina has an original illustrated edition of Alice in Wonderland?" Lily burst into the kitchen where Eli was making coffee, eyes wide. "And she even let me wear white gloves, like in a museum, to hold it." From there, things continued with drawing lessons, Serafina unexpectedly revealing an artistic talent that surprised even Eli. She had once studied at the Rhode Island School of Design before her father forced her to drop out in favor of a more practical business degree. Now she sat in a sunlit room overlooking the Chicago skyline, patiently teaching Lily how to build perspective, how to shade. The two of them bent over a sketchbook as if they'd slipped into a world that belonged only to them. "She has a natural gift," Serafina whispered to Eli one afternoon while Lily was absorbed in sketching the rose garden below. "She sees things adults overlook, the way light changes shape, the way shadows create depth. She has an artist's eye." Eli felt a strange mix of pride and unease. He had always encouraged Lily's interest in mechanics, automatically assuming she might one day follow in his footsteps. He had never imagined his daughter could carry talents he didn't know how to nurture, passions he didn't have the expertise to guide. What else had he missed about his own child? As Serafina's physical strength rose and fell with each treatment cycle, Eli began taking on more responsibility within her business world. What began as simply accompanying her to meetings gradually became helping her prep for them, reviewing reports, listening as she rehearsed responses, and eventually offering his own perspective, seeing things as an outsider unburdened by corporate jargon. "You know what your real problem is?" Eli asked one evening as they sat in Serafina's home office surrounded by a mountain of quarterly reports. "You're so focused on technological innovation that you forget the human part. People don't just want faster networks or better data packages. They want to feel connected. They want to feel heard." Serafina looked up, irritation flickering before slowly giving way to genuine thought. "Go on, look at your customer service model. It's efficient, sure, but it's all automated menus and outsourced call centers. What if instead you built community service hubs, local offices staffed by people who live in the area, understand the needs of each region, and build relationships with customers?" That idea later became Serafina's signature initiative, Sterling Community Connections, a network of local service centers that doubled as tech training hubs for underserved communities. The board was skeptical at first until the South Chicago pilot program showed a 40% increase in customer retention, accompanied by a wave of glowing media coverage. Thorne's absence from those board meetings was conspicuous, but Eli was experienced enough not to mistake silence for surrender. Someone like Marcus Thorne didn't retreat. He stepped back to sharpen the blade. The next blow came 3 weeks after the press conference, in a way Eli never saw coming. He was at Vance's garage discussing paperwork with Buck when his phone rang. A woman's voice he didn't recognize came through. Elias Vance, this is Principal Henderson of Lakeside Elementary. There's been an incident involving Lily. We need you here immediately. Eli's heart pounded as he sped across town. Worst-case scenarios flashed through his mind. Lily hurt, sick, in trouble. The principal's grave expression when he walked in did nothing to ease him. Mr. Vance, we've had a rather serious situation, Principal Henderson said, cheeks flushed with frustration. A group of older students teased Lily about the articles online, showing her stories about you and Miss Sterling on their phones. They called her names, implying her father was involved with Ms. Sterling because of money. Shame and anger slammed into Eli at the same time, hot enough to choke him. Where is she? In the nurse's office. She's not physically injured, but she's very upset. We've suspended the students involved and are scheduling a school-wide assembly on respect and privacy. We take bullying extremely seriously, Mr. Vance. Lily sat stiffly on the cot, her small face patchy from tears, but her expression tight, forced. The kind of stubborn determination Eli recognized instantly. It cracked the moment she saw her father. Dad, I punched Braden Cole in the nose. Made it bleed. Her voice wobbled, caught between pride and hurt. He called you. A bad word I'm not allowed to say. Then he said, Serafina only liked you because you're her toy. I don't even know what that means. Eli swallowed hard and knelt to meet her eyes. Are you okay, sweetheart? Lily wiped her nose on her sleeve, a childlike gesture that made his heart ache. I told them they were stupid. They don't know anything. I said, my dad is the best dad in the whole world, and Serafina is sick, and my dad helps her because that's what good people do. Her eyes filled again, but then Braden shoved his phone in my face and showed me a photo of you taking money from Serafina, and everyone laughed. I got so mad I couldn't see straight. On the drive home, they sat in silence. Lily stared out the window while Eli was crushed beneath the weight of his own thoughts. This was exactly what he had feared. His daughter paying the price for his choices. Suddenly, every number, every paycheck, every calculation meant nothing next to Lily's red, swollen eyes. I'm quitting, Eli told Serafina that night, standing in her study, hands shoved deep into his pockets. Lily got bullied because of me, because of us. This whole arrangement, it's not worth it. Serafina sat down at the stack of financial reports she was holding and looked at him with an unreadable expression. That's your solution. Running away? It's not running away. It's protecting my kid. The anger in him finally finding somewhere to go, not at Serafina, but at himself, at the chain of choices that led them here. She's 10, Serafina. She shouldn't have to defend me to her classmates. She shouldn't have to hear people say her dad gets paid to date someone. Serafina's gaze sharpened like a blade. Then what lesson are you planning to teach her? She asked, voice cool but never raised. That when things get hard, the answer is to walk away. That when you're bullied, the solution is to disappear. Her words struck directly at the soft, vulnerable place where Eli's doubts already lived. That's not fair, he shot back. Is it not? Serafina stepped closer. Despite having had treatment 2 days ago, her stride was steady, almost intimidating. When you became a single father, did you honestly think you could shield Lily from every hurt, from every insult, every rumor, every unfairness in the world? Her voice softened but didn't weaken. Life is cruel, Elias. Adults are like that, and children can be even worse. Walking away doesn't erase anything. The rumors will still be there. The photos will still be online. All walking away does is tell Lily, the world, and yourself that you can be chased off just because someone didn't like your story. Eli exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, frustrated with reality and himself alike. So what do you suggest? Let my daughter get bullied while we pretend everything's fine. My solution is to face it head on, Serafina replied, moving past the desk and stopping right in front of him, close enough for Eli to see the tiny golden flecks inside her blue eyes. Let me go to Lily's school, meet her classmates, meet her teachers. Let me show them who I really am, not the distorted shadow in the tabloids. No way. Eli reacted almost instinctively. I'm not turning you into some PR prop paraded around my daughter's school. A flicker of hurt flashed through Serafina's eyes before being replaced by the familiar steel. Is that what you think I'm doing? A photo op? Her voice cooled. I care about Lily, Elias. That might not have been part of the original contract, but it is now, and I'm offering to help in the only way I know how. The air between them tightened, pulsing for several beats before Eli had to admit, even reluctantly, that maybe her approach wasn't entirely wrong. Fine, he said quietly. But if I see a single camera, a single reporter, yours or anyone else's, we're done. I mean it, Serafina. Lily is not a pawn in any battle between you and Thorne or the board. She isn't, Serafina replied, her voice soft but firm enough to stop him in his tracks. And this is not a game for me anymore, Elias. Not anymore. The visit to Lakeside Elementary was arranged with meticulous care. No press, no cameras, no spectacle. Just Serafina participating in Career Day alongside dozens of other parents and guest speakers. She dressed simply, left her designer bags at home, and covered her wig with an ordinary scarf, subtle enough to acknowledge her health, but not enough to invite pity or intrusive curiosity. Her talk with Lily's class wasn't about wealth or status, but about communication technology and how it connects people across great distances. She brought a few prototype phones for the kids to pass around, explained how satellites transmit signals, how waves travel, and ended with an unexpectedly touching message. Use technology to build bridges, not walls. People think technology is about devices and data, but it's really about connection, Serafina said, her voice softening as if she too was looking back on herself. When I was diagnosed with leukemia, I dialed the wrong number in the middle of the night. Instead of hanging up, the person on the other end came to the hospital and sat with me through the scariest night of my life. That connection, a voice in the dark, a hand to hold when you're afraid, was stronger than any technology I've ever built. Lily sat in the front row, practically glowing with pride. The kids who had whispered behind her back could only stare, slack-jawed. After the presentation, Serafina went down to the cafeteria to have lunch with Lily, sitting at the noisy table as if she ate off plastic trays every day. She answered questions about satellites and cell towers, while skillfully deflecting personal ones with light jokes that made the kids burst out laughing. By the time they left the school, something fundamental had shifted in the children's eyes. Serafina was no longer the woman who paid Lily's dad to be her boyfriend. She had become Lily's friend, a fascinating adult who knew a lot about art and technology, and most importantly treated Lily as if her thoughts truly mattered. That night, when Eli tucked Lily into bed, the question he had feared finally emerged. Dad, do you love Serafina? I mean, love her for real, not pretend love for acting. Eli slowly smoothed the edge of the blanket, buying a few seconds to choose his words. The truth was, he himself no longer knew where the line between real and pretend even was. What I feel for Serafina is a little complicated, his voice rasped more than he intended. Adults always say that when they don't want to answer, Lily replied, her skeptical little stare hitting him square in the chest. So painfully reminiscent of Elena. I think you love her, and I think she loves you too. She looks at you the same way Sophie's mom looks at her new husband. That's enough from my tiny matchmaker. Eli tapped her nose, trying to steer the conversation away with a touch of humor. Now sleep. But when he turned off the light and pulled the door shut, Lily's words lingered in his mind. Did Serafina look at him differently? And he already started looking at her differently without noticing. The line between their convenient arrangement and something real had blurred gradually. And only when he was forced to confront it tonight did Eli realize somewhere along the way, their deal had grown into something neither of them had planned for. And just like that, the pieces of their lives began to fit together in ways no one could have predicted. Eli found something he thought he had lost forever after Elena passed away. The ability to open his heart to someone new. Not to replace what had been lost, but to create something entirely different. Serafina discovered that real strength didn't lie in controlling everything, but in trusting enough to let someone in, that she didn't have to fight alone. In Lily, she found someone who wasn't trying to become a new mother, but simply a friend. Someone who taught her how to draw, who listened to her dreams, and who made her father smile in a way she hadn't seen since her mom died. But out there in the power-laced hallways of Sterling Networks, Marcus Thorne hadn't spoken his last word. The man who had spent 30 years building an empire beside Richard Sterling wasn't going to let it slip through his fingers so easily. And Arthur, the ex-boyfriend who abandoned Serafina when she needed him most, was planning a return. Not out of love, but something far more dangerous: wounded pride and boundless ambition. Meanwhile, the $1 million remained in the escrow account, a sum that once seemed like the answer to every problem, now turning into the most complicated question of all. When a relationship begins as a contract, but grows into love, what does money even mean? If you followed the story all the way to this point on Ebon Stories, thank you so much for staying until the end. But the story is far from over. Do you want to know what tricks will Thorne use to sabotage Serafina? How will Arthur return? And what chaos will he bring with him? Will Eli and Serafina survive the looming vote of no confidence? And most importantly, will their love be strong enough to withstand everything? If you want me to start writing part 2 filled with drama, twists, corporate scheming, and even deeper romance, leave a comment below the video saying continue part 2. Subscribe to Ebon Stories so you don't miss part 2, where everything will get hotter and far more intense. Like this video if this story touched your heart. Share it with friends who also love emotional romantic storytelling. If this video reaches 1,000 likes and 500 comments requesting it, I will release part 2 next week. See you in the next chapter of Elias and Serafina's journey. And remember, sometimes a wrong number call is destiny calling.